All right, what's up, everybody? So, welcome back. Today is kind of a little bit of a one-off little vlog. The other day I was out running, and I was kind of thinking about some stuff, and this idea popped in my brain. This idea popped in that I was like, you know what? There's this term that a lot of people use, especially a lot of runners, people in the you know health and wellness industry, but I think that we have a hard time as a society of really defining what it is. So I wanted to kind of take a little bit of an adventure and dive into this and kind of talk about some of the nuances that we might use to describe this term, and then hopefully by the end of it, kind of start looking at the nuance of this term and see if we can maybe give it a little bit more of a definition and really kind of dive in a little bit more into what this actually is. Okay, and the term I'm looking at is fitness. Okay, what is fitness? I first of all, just like any other person, what do you do when you want to start looking something up? You go to the Google, and you ask Google what is fitness, and Google gave me the most useless answer ever. It said that it was the act of being fit. Okay. So okay, we're gonna have to do a little bit a little bit deeper dive here, really kind of figuring out what's going on with this term of fitness. Okay, so I started thinking back, like, okay, what are some places that we hear this term fitness? Okay, well, a lot of times we hear people talk about, like, oh yeah, I'm super fit, I'm ready to race. But then you also hear some people, they're like, oh, I'm super fit, but I'm not fast, I need to break off some rust. Okay, so we can definitely say that it has something to do with how you are physiologically, I guess would be the best way to kind of talk about that. And so I started diving in a little bit, and kind of a good textbook answer, if you look at a lot of like health textbooks and whatnot, I kind of went through some of the ones that I've used, for teaching, or ones that I've got for my undergrad still. And I kind of saw a pretty consistent answer there. And I've got it here. It says it's the condition of being physically fit and healthy, and it involves the following attributes: mental acuity, cardiorespiratory endurance, muscular strength, muscular endurance, body composition, and flexibility. And I was like, okay, I feel like that's a good place to start. Okay, so by this definition, it starts giving us a little bit more of a picture of just saying, like, okay, I'm physiologically good to specific things physiologically, right? We have cardiorespiratory endurance, right? We're cardiovascularly fit. There's muscular strength, muscular endurance, right? You'd be able to produce force, um, flexibility, right? I can reach behind my head. Mental acuity, right? Now we're adding in a little bit more of the psychological aspect of it, not just physiological. So we're starting to fill in that picture just a little bit more. But I was like, okay, that's a fair answer, but I feel like there's more that we could look at. And so I started looking in a little bit deeper, and I found one definition out of one of the textbooks that I have for like a biology class. I was like, oh, this is really good. It's the ability to meet the demands of the environment around you. And I feel like this is one where we can really kind of dive in, grab a hold of, and really kind of explore and get us to a really good answer. Okay, so what does that mean? To be able to meet the demands of the environment. Okay, so if we have some sort of stress that's put on the body, can our body react and respond to those stresses? Okay, this could be in a very Darwinian situation where we're looking at, like, oh, can a species adapt to its environment? Okay, we could also look at this from an athletic standpoint, which is what we're going to kind of focus on here. The stresses that are put on your body. You go run intervals. Can your body handle those intervals? Can they react to those intervals? Right? One of the things that I mentioned way back, and I'll kind of give credit again to this, but the growth equation, Steve Magnus, Brad Stallworth, they have this equation that I really, really enjoy, and it says that stress plus rest equals growth. Okay, so the idea of being fit and having fitness, I think, really kind of flourishes with this idea of, if you put a stress on the body, can you have some, when you have some sort of adaptation to that stress to get an outcome. Okay, so let's start looking at this as, some more running specific situations. If you look at majority of fitness trackers out there, whether it be some sort of Garmin, Polar device, Whoop, Strava's getting in the game with some of their algorithms, they all have some way of managing and predicting your fitness. Okay, now what are they actually measuring? It's hard to say. I don't know what their algorithms are actually looking at, but they say, like, hey, here's your fitness. And if we start looking at what they tell us and what our definition that we just kind of came up with, I think we can really start seeing some interesting trends and really get a better understanding of what fitness is. Okay, so we'll use myself as an example, right? I've got a Garmin. The Garmin, I can go into the settings and it can give me race predictors, right? It tells me, like, hey, this is about what your fitness is according to them. So what does that mean? Well, if we look at some of the trends that have occurred over the last, however many weeks that I've been doing this, we see some interesting things that pop up. Okay, we usually think of, like, oh, you go do a workout, you get fitter, right? Not always. And actually, by looking at my data, we see just the opposite. Okay, if we look at when I was at some of the training cycles that were the heaviest so far, it actually showed my fitness dropping down. It actually say, like, oh, your training is unproductive. It's not because I was doing bad workouts. It was because I was under areas of high intensity. Okay, when I started that training session, it'd be like, oh yeah, it's super productive, you're getting fitter. And it's because my body could handle those stresses. Okay, once I started going deep into that training cycle, and before I hit that rest on the other side, right, our growth equation, stress plus rest equals growth. As we were adding that stress in, but before we got to that growth phase, or to the rest phase for that growth, our body, it started reducing its fitness. It couldn't handle the stresses as well, stresses of the environment. Okay, whether they're stresses that I put on myself, whether it's stresses of the environment around me, it doesn't matter. Stress is stress. Okay, and so we look at that. Okay, that's one way of, like, if we increase too much of that stress, our body can't handle it as much, our fitness actually starts going down. On the flip side, when you start seeing me take rest, it actually started being like, oh yeah, your fitness is going way up. It's not the fact that resting increases your fitness, but it's resting after that stress that increases your fitness. It increases your ability to handle the stress on it later. So ideally, I want to have my greatest amount of fitness just before the race. Okay, I want to come off, I want to be nice and rested coming into that race so that my body can handle the stresses of the race put on it. Okay, if I keep putting stress on it and fitness starts kind of dwindling a little bit, my body won't be able to handle the stress put on it of the race. Okay, but we can look at other things beyond that. I went to altitude for a little bit, right? We went up to Bend, not super high altitude, but it's altitude. And when I first got up there, my Garmin was like, oh yeah, cool, you're doing good. But after I was there for a few days and the stress of being in altitude started waning on my body, it was like, hey, your training's unproductive. It's not doing much for you. And my fitness started dropping according to this. Okay, because my body was getting tired. It was getting fatigued from that extra stress of altitude. This last week, my Garmin's like, hey, your fitness is going down. Your training is unproductive. Hey, but guess what? It was really hot out. Heat is a stress. And actually, there's some bunch of research out there that shows that heat training and altitude training show similar improvements in performance for different reasons, but both the idea of like, hey, this is extra stress on your body. If we can stress at the beginning and we can move on and we can have that rest later on, we're going to get fitter. Okay? If we keep stressing, we're becoming less fitter and having a lower ability to handle the stresses of our environment. But then, okay, so I keep talking about all these things like, oh, my fitness went down when I put these stresses on it. But every single time, right now it's getting cooler. My Garmin says like, hey, your fitness is going up. Good job. When I came back from altitude, my Garmin was like, hey, your fitness is going up. Good job. When I had the high intensity training, I went into my rest phase and it said, hey, good job. Your fitness is going up. Okay, so I think this is really interesting to look at this idea of what is fitness, how do we describe it? Because again, I feel like it's not always the easiest thing to describe. It's one of these topics that we talk about, but I don't know if we actually have a true descriptor of this. And that brings into another little side point that I want to discuss is the difference between fit and being fast. Okay. You hear this a lot of times of athletes going into a race and like, hey, this is a rest buster. Okay. I'm super fit. I'm not ready to run fast yet. Well, what does that mean? If you're fit, it means you can handle the stresses of the environment, right? But sometimes there's this thing that's kind of holding you back. Sometimes you need to add in a little bit of like a race situation to kind of sharpen your tool, right? We might be fit. We might have this giant hammer, but we might need to fine tune it just a little bit. Might need to change the, how we use it. Might need to fine tune how we approach using that tool. Okay, and so a lot of times athletes will go into a race as a rust buster, because they need to get back into that mental state of what does it feel like to race? What does it feel like to hurt in the moment and push through to get to the finish line faster? Maybe there's some neurological, neuromuscular stuff that still needs to go on that you're like, okay, I'm fit. My body can handle the stress. We just need to fine tune some things a little bit. Okay. So the idea of, doing this huge buildup and then doing a race is fine. You'll get a lot of really good training adaptation from it, but sometimes it's good to add in little bits of races as kind of like rust busters or really big workouts as rust busters to kind of get that mental acuity really dialed in, or getting some of the psychological aspects of running at certain paces or some of the neuromuscular adaptations in there to get you ready to really run fast in that situation. So, okay, I thought this was a nice little sidetrack. I thought there were some really cool things that we could discuss here. If you guys want more of things like this, comments down below. I have no problem diving in and talking about some of these pieces of training and how they can help and where you might add them in and stuff. So, all right, that's it for today. I guess I'll talk to you guys next time. Happy running. Bye.